Awareness, the final frontier. This is Awareness Explorers.
Hey friends, welcome back to Awareness Explorers. I'm your co-host, Jonathan, and I'm with my friend and co-host,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
and we have another guest who I, as usual, know almost nothing about. And Brian has spent the last several years following him around. I'm kidding, of course. But I have heard some interesting things. I'm looking forward to talking to Alex Shailer. Is that how you say your name, Alex?
You did a good job. That was
Okay, good.
pretty good.
I love your bio. You have the best beginning bio of anyone we've interviewed. It says, Alex is the name of an apparent person that consciousness is appearing as. That should be the beginning of all the bios that we have. Anyways, he calls himself a non duality informed coach, although he recognizes all labels to be descriptions and never encapsulate the ultimate truth. We could throw that in every bio too. Several years ago, he decided to become what we call a coach, which is not advice giving, as many people think, but involves asking powerful questions to co-facilitate rapid life transformation. Over time, Alex's practices evolved into co-creating deep emotional shifts, profound revelations, and awakenings with his clients through a variety of powerful modalities under the coaching umbrella term. He also runs a YouTube channel communicating the message of non-duality, the consciousness-only model of the universe, emotional healing and releasing, conscious creation, manifestation, and relationships, and whatever dry tongue-in-cheek humor ends up spontaneously popping up. Well, welcome to Alex. Welcome to Awareness Explorers, Alex.
Good to be here, guys.
So, where should we begin? The few things I do know about you, Alex, is that you kind of have become kind of a consciousness coach, and Brian and I sometimes do that. And I'm wondering how you would describe what you're trying to do in your meetings with people.
Trying to help them achieve what they want or realize they already have it is basically that would be it if I could only say one sentence. I started off as a coach after being an electrician for many years, working in a UK supermarket, fixing door handles, plug sockets, toilet seats, and wanted something more meaningful after a relationship breakdown. So I investigated this thing called coaching, which I got involved in because I wanted to just help people. That was the basic motivation. And also possibly communicate that and connect with people through YouTube, because YouTube had been a platform at the time that had helped me so much through the pain of the breakup that I was going through at the time and the subsequent revelations and awakenings and transformations that led me to very quickly move to a much better feeling state and discover deeper aspects of ourselves. So in a way, it started off as a desire to give back and a desire just to help. But over time, well, maybe very quickly, I realized that I didn't want to put people on a path or be contributing to putting people on a path of perpetual self-improvement under the model that people are broken or not good enough and need to be improved or something like that. So I think sometimes when I use the term consciousness or non-duality in reference to coaching, what it basically means is bringing together the coaching modality, which is asking powerful questions that help raise awareness in other people and support and facilitate co-create transformation, but under the premise that we already are peace, wholeness, fulfillment, and that coaching can operate as a modality to facilitate the embodiment of that, along with powerful self-inquiry questions that help point us back to our true nature. And I didn't know how it was going to go. I kind of just, in a way, invented a job, but it seems like quite a few people resonated. And over the years, I've worked with people under this model, and it works to have powerful conversations to keep on pointing back to the truth of who we are and its immediacy and its unconditionality, at the same time as recognizing there can be things in the world to relatively achieve emotional states of peace and calm, the transcendence or releasing of troubling emotions, and practical achievements in terms of business or project or success in whatever creative endeavor one wishes to be in. So really, it's just pulling it all together, all my interests and hopefully the interests and desires of other people to create something that serves them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that description. I also especially love the part where you talked about that. We used a phrase that one of my favorite phrases is that it's already here, because most of the time we in the spirituality game are looking to become something in the future or to gain something that we don't have, and it seems that's the opposite direction of where happiness lies, which is or that unconditional happiness that's there, at least what I've experienced in awareness itself, is already here. Whether, it's just sort of veiled by all these thoughts about the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel like the key distinction is one paradigm can be operating under the premise that we are just a person, living in the material world who's on a never-ending crusade to dispel the dissatisfaction and reach wholeness. And that comes with the paradigm of being just a person in a material world. Now, there are many apparent people open to something beyond that. Another paradigm that we are not just the person, we appear as the person, but what we essentially are is the consciousness that the person appears as. And the consciousness is already complete and perfect and whole as it is, and that there is peace and satisfaction in our true nature as this consciousness. Yet at the same time, there is the relative appearance of time and the person, and that can be engaged with in order to transform the experience on the relative plane, create harmonious relationships, have a positive impact on the world. But no longer is it done from the premise of being a person who needs to find some perpetual satisfaction in that will never come, or some kind of accolade or achievement to add on to oneself to become complete. It's done ever more increasingly from the premise of completeness, from the premise of wholeness. And in that way, we become actually a lot more effective and beneficial for all in how we act in the world, because we are no longer operating under the paradigm of being a person who's attached to all the outcomes, but under the paradigm of being this consciousness, which may have the momentum of the personal attachments, and our route to creation and manifestation is less so building ourselves up into a different person, but releasing those personal attachments and aversions, so that the old paradigm of being just a person with those limitations gradually falls away in the openness of awareness and more of the natural qualities of awareness or consciousness that were already present are increasingly more expressed. So
I'm
I
curious
think you
how
could call it
you
like living from the inside out or something like that.
I'm curious how you help people to release their stuck beliefs, emotions, or attachments so that the consciousness can shine through more consistently.
The contracted emotional energies, and just to context, we're not labeling these as right or wrong, they just are, appear to be located somewhere in the body area or have a correspondence with the body mind system in terms of perhaps locations in the deep brain, the nervous system, the muscles, or even an etheric emotional body. And they are felt and experienced primarily through the interoceptive sense, which is the feeling sense, the feeling of the body from the inside. And our emotions tend to get stuck in the system, therefore not flowing through, therefore repressed and suppressed, and therefore causing physical discomfort and fueling personal and sometimes destructive thinking. They get suppressed through different forms, through not having the capacity to process our emotions. Under this, in the context of this conversation, maybe the most relevant would be identification to and belief in the separate sense of self in the mind, listening to and believing all the thoughts, which has our attention in the thought space and not with our emotional body and the feeling sense. And so therefore bringing the attention, relaxing the attention back from just the personhood and the thinking to this wide open space of awareness in which the feeling sense appears, and fully feeling those emotions and being able to experience them in the context of safety, in the context of this conversation, the existential safety of the recognition of ourself as awareness, which is undisturbed and imperturbed by all emotional energy. That emotional energy is enabled to be fully felt, and in its full feeling, it tends to be released. And like our true nature, being the sky, is already immediate, already bright and sunny, these stuck emotions can sometimes seem like the clouds that obscure the qualities of our true nature. But as we allow ourselves to fully feel our feelings, which is what I would guide someone to setting up a context of safety and in a resource and skillfully able to do that, these emotions are able to flow through and release, and more of the natural peace and calm qualities, unconditional in our true nature, are also expressed in the conditional systems of our nervous system and our thoughts in terms of feeling calm in the body and mind. And that's been my experience and my journey through emotional healing and releasing, and many of the clients that I've worked with as well.
Yeah, allowing ourselves to feel our emotions fully. That sounds so key because a lot of people come to spirituality for actually, whether they realize it or not, for the opposite reason, to not have the emotion. Okay, I'm going to meditate so that I don't feel anxious because I feel anxious right now. And just as you said in your experience, in my experience, when I do that, I stop and I realize, hey, wait a minute. You're meditating now so that you don't have the feeling that you have. Or I'm meditating now so I can get back something I had yesterday. And when I drop both of those, it's like, oh, it's such a relief. There's a laughter behind it when you stop trying to control experience.
Yeah, it's so counterintuitive. And in fact, we find that control to be in the idea and belief in being a person who needs to control. When the attention is relaxed back from that and we rest as open awareness, we find open awareness has a natural quality of allowing. Like on one level, we can relatively say we can allow ourselves to fully feel our emotions. And I should add that there are relative processes that can help catalyze this, that I may help guide people with, that is beyond just fully feel your emotions and feel safe. There can be processes that can facilitate this. However, yes, we say relatively we allow and accept and fully feel our emotions, but from the non-dual perspective and resting as the recognition of ourselves as open awareness, we find the nature of that to be naturally allowing and naturally welcoming and naturally accepting just by its nature without anyone having to do it. So part of it is about bringing these the ultimate truth together with the relative processes. On one level, we engage with our emotions through that counterintuitive thing of not trying to transcend them, but actually allowing ourselves to fully face and experience them. At the same time, we can recognize ourselves to be the space of awareness in which they naturally flow through, and in resting more and more as our true nature as awareness, they are allowed to flow through more naturally, more rapidly, more efficiently, processed and released. So more of the peace and calm and love and compassion and wise action of our true nature is ever increasingly experienced in the personal realm.
Don't you think, Alex, that sometimes people, I'm a psychotherapist by training, uh, that they can get stuck in certain emotions? Psychologists will sometimes say, feel your emotions, don't resist them. But that, in my experience, for some people can be a rabbit hole they go down and they never quite get to the non-dual awareness and flowing state. And if and when that happens, first of all, have you seen that? And if and when that happens, what do you do about it?
Being stuck in a feeling or stuck with an emotion.
Yeah, yeah. You could call it depression or grief, or some people just get stuck feeling anxiety all the time.
There are probably multiple factors that can contribute to any feeling state, which seems to be, how should we say, more consistent. In
Mm-hmm.
my experience, much of its source could be or would be in, for whatever reason, the continuing of belief and identification with the thinking and the apparent self in the mind, because that's what is where, if we stay with our attention, we are not fully feeling the interoceptive sense and our emotions and able to process. And that is also where we can go perpetually round forever on a story about me and my life and my situation. However, we have to recognize as well on the human level, there can be multiple impacts. There could be environmental impacts. There could be nutritional impacts, biological. The states of the body and nervous system can contribute to how we might feel or how we might feel consistently beyond just I'm believing in the mental stories or I'm not fully feeling the emotions and enough. But it's, I think that's where we should at least start to see if there's a possibility of really pointing to our true nature in a loving and compassionate and open way, so that one can move through being apparently stuck in something by realizing they can never truly be stuck in something, because they are the space, they are the consciousness in which that appears. And that recognition is the basis for your podcast, and the I would say probably the most powerful doorway to potential transcendence, if there is one.
Mhm.
That's certainly my
Uh,
experience. I find that barring any biological or nutritional basis for my feelings, it's the continuing of the story that feeds them and keeps them going. But when I discovered that the body is an ally here, that just simply noticing what sensations are appearing right now in my body, and then saying, okay, maybe not pay so much attention to the story about it, that's been really, really helpful. And that was not there in the beginning of my
Mm.
so-called spiritual search. It was a
Mm,
discovery that really helped, because it's a feeling that you have in your body. It can only be now. But
that's
the
true.
thought thing is all about what happened in the past and what might happen in the future. And oh my gosh.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're trying to be understanding and compassionate that life can sometimes be a challenge, and that situations can be complex, and there can be multiple factors. At the same time, awareness, consciousness, our true nature has an inherent superintelligence. And if there is an inherent superintelligence that goes beyond the mind and the story and the data of the individual self. And if there is anything to be done about food to eat, or diets to change, or drugs to take, or social situations to change, or boundaries to draw, that may contribute to transcending or overcoming a persistent, uncomfortable emotional state, it most powerfully, I would suggest, comes from resting as the open awareness and open intelligence that we are. And that's what I found as well, when there are practical measures to take about practical problems or very apparently real feeling states. Usually the solutions and answers come from, yes, on one level, using the intellect and skill and the mind to be intelligently thoughtful about things, but realizing that it's not the dominating force here, and that awareness has dominance over all appearance. And so when we rest more and more so as awareness, the data and the things to do tend to become more and more increasingly apparent spontaneously.
that's well said. I'm curious. I've actually had a couple of coaching sessions from a spiritual teacher recently, who was very good. And he asked me some very interesting questions that helped me to uh, let go of some ideas and beliefs I had. And I'm wondering what kinds of questions you ask people who you're coaching and trying to help them pass stuck places.
Well, I guess first it would be dependent on what the person is asking for.
Mhm.
Like, are they asking to change their beliefs on something? Um, the way I've ended up being positioned, with non-duality being at the forefront at the moment, most of the beliefs, persistent limiting beliefs that people were requesting assistance on dispelling, are to do with the nature of the separate self and the ego and the personhood, and seeing through those particular beliefs or apparent limitations. And the way that I converse with people, it can only be effective if I am having a discussion or asking questions that points out or co-creates a pointing out of what is true in their experience, in our reality. Because if someone wants to transcend a belief, I can't just try to give them a new belief or try some trick in order to change that belief into something else. All limiting beliefs dissolve in the face of the truth, and the truth has to be seen and experienced for oneself, or seen maybe is more accurately, because that's when the limiting beliefs fall away. So I will simply point out or ask questions around whether things are true in that person's experience. So, for example, if someone thinks that they may be able to be harmed by their emotional state or their thoughts, we could do an investigation on that, and I could ask the question. There may be a bit more of a setup to this, by the way, rather than just this one question out of the blue. However, something like, well, what is these emotional states made out of in our experience? Can we confirm that it's made out of bodily sensations or just sensation or thoughts? Would you agree that you are aware and that you actually are this awareness, this consciousness? Has any sensation or any thought harmed or disturbed you, awareness, you, consciousness? And if the person is to say no, I would want to verify, and I usually can by intuition, that that is coming from their direct reality and experience, not what a book said, not what's a YouTube channel or a spiritual teacher said, but what is actually verifiable and true in one's experience, because that is the only sustainable way to dispel a belief.
Yeah, I like that. When I was working with this one coach, I would sometimes, he would ask a question, I'd say, well, that feels like resistance. And I liked how he would respond. He says, well, what is resistance? Any label I used, we would basically dissect it until it was basically sensations, energy, and frequency, and God knows what. It just turned into nothing.
Were those most of the questions that he asked? Was you know, asking what anything that you put a label on, asking what it really was, or what other kind of questions was he asking?
Well, that was a lot of it, and I found that very helpful. As Alex said, it when you let go of labels and you go into the direct experience, your labels become meaningless, and you realize you're just present with what's happening, which is a totally different way of living than in the concepts and labels and beliefs that we normally walk around with.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's like the mental interpretations and the story, although relevant, is secondary or tertiary, and it's usually where we're focusing on most of our attention. And these kinds of questions that break through those interpretations to our raw direct experience of reality usually have the experience or feeling processed more effectively, because even biologically we are in a way, accessing deeper parts of the brain, because I would suggest that most of our troublesome experiences come from particular uncomfortable feeling states. And although there's a lot about how the story creates the suffering, and an identification with that creates the suffering, and there's the recognition of that. If, for example, one is traumatized, regardless of whether or not you have a story going, you have a perpetual background discomfort and pain in the body. That's an extreme example of unprocessed emotions, but we all have, possibly most of us may have, a background degree of unease. Now, if we're only dealing with our interpretations on a biological level, we're only dealing with the prefrontal cortex, where the thinking reside, or whether there is a correspondence with the thinking, whereas actually the way we feel has more of a correspondence with the limbic system and the nervous system, and that is accessed through the feeling sense, the interoceptive sense. So when we pierce through the story and get to our direct experience, either of energy or sensation or whatever we want to call it, actually we're enabling a lot of deep processing to go on, and a lot of experiences to move forward in time and to flow through this awareness, and is also now becoming the whole basis for healing modalities like somatic experiencing, EMDR, brain spotting. All these modalities are recognizing there is limitations in just working on the cognitive level, and that actually there's a healing that is facilitated through creating a space for the body and mind system to natural healing ability to work its magic by withdrawing our attention from just the cognitive landscape and trying to negotiate with all the thoughts and fix it from that level, come into a recognition of ourselves as aware spaciousness, our feeling state, and allowing things to process.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Go on, Brian.
That's actually explains a lot, and in a way that's a very optimistic way of looking at it. I mean, optimistic in the best sense. And I never really thought of it in those terms, but as you were describing it, it felt true inside. It felt like something was getting reorganized inside as the stories relax, as the direct experience comes into the fore, and the background of awareness actually becomes identified with.
Well, I do a lot of, you don't know this, Alex, work with people while they're on the drug MDMA or ecstasy. And most of that work involves creating a safe enough space so that they can feel and process stuck feelings. And I have found that if people can do that, that they naturally heal. It's like this backlog has now been completely digested, and now they can move forward. And you don't need MDMA to do that. It's just that drug helps people to feel safety. So feeling completely safe with one's feelings is certainly a big part of this. And I'm wondering if you have any particular things that help people to get to that place where they can completely be okay with sometimes feelings of discomfort.
Yeah, that's such an important thing. I mean, through work with modalities like you've mentioned, and I think like you've suggested, a big part of that, like you've suggested, is that it's creating in one way, perhaps pharmacologically, and also obviously with the I don't know if you call it a client therapist relationship or whatever you'd call it, is creating that context of safety in order to feel and process the feelings and move the experiences forward in time. So yeah, it speaks to exactly what we're pointing to. And so modalities, whatever they are, can be used. And also, and there is creating relative safety through environmental safety, social safety. I could talk more about that, but I think that conversation has already been had by more of like the therapy world. There's really good information out there about how to create relative safety and inner resources, which I talk about in my material and go into more detail on. But perhaps even more relevant for this podcast and conversation, I like to umbrella the whole thing in the possibility of existential safety in the recognition of our true nature as consciousness, as awareness, because relative safety in the relative world is crucial and important. But in a way, we could say the ultimate safety surrounding all that is the fact that we are this consciousness that is unharmed and undisturbed and imperturbed by all experience, by all emotional states, by the most painful emotional pain, by the most dark, chaotic thoughts, by the most challenging experiences. And once again, this isn't supposed to be just a cute theory or belief, but something that we can actually discover in our direct experience. And we can get closer to that through particular skillful metaphors, which aren't originally mine, like I've had many different influences. But for example, if we imagine consciousness to be like a screen on which everything's appearing, does the content that appears on a movie screen ever harm the screen? Even if atom bombs were to go off in the movie, or the characters are running around having a terrible, chaotic time, or there's unicorns and rainbows and wonderful things happening and the characters winning the lottery, the screen itself remains completely undisturbed and unchanged. And so we can use that metaphor to look at our direct experience, ask ourselves, am I aware? Am I present? Am I essentially this consciousness? And has this consciousness ever been disturbed or ever been scathed or stained by my emotional experience, thought experience, or circumstantial experience? And I don't know about you, but when I investigate it and when I ask all of my clients, we all eventually come back to the answer, no. Yes, the body may have changed in the appearances. We age, the bones get a bit creaky. Yes, our thoughts about things have changed. We may have been even feeling in the last few years a bit more uncomfortable in the body and a bit more emotionally uncomfortable than we previously did. However, this just sense or presence of beingness, or this screen of awareness or consciousness on which everything appears, is this imperturbable, unchanging medium or space as which everything appears, which is existentially safe in that way. In that way, in this recognition of ourselves as this unharmable, undisturbable space of awareness in which all the content appears, we can face life's challenges and we can feel our emotions fully and experience the thoughts however they are in the context of an experiential recognition of our true nature as this open awareness, which comes from resting perceptually open as awareness, as the screen, and experiencing that unconditionality and seeing that the content doesn't disturb who we essentially and fundamentally are. And that is also the transcendence of the fear of birth and death too, because just like if a character dies in a movie, nothing happens to the screen, and just how if our personal body may die, our presence of consciousness that this appears at will remain undisturbed and timeless and ever present, and we can verify that in our experience through this recognition.
Yeah, that's a beautiful summary of what I think is really the most important aspect of all of this that we're talking about. I love the screen analogy that the screen is unharmed. I love the analogy of that the sky is not affected by the clouds or the thunderstorms, and that the shift of identity from that little me to the big I, the big spaciousness, seems to be where healing happens. And I've always thought of emotional healing as not something that you get from out there and you bring in, but something that happens by itself when we get out of the way.
Yeah. When we get out of the way, or we realize that we are not the one who's in the way in the first place.
Even better. Yes, right. There's something else I wanted to ask you about, just shifting slightly, because one of my favorite videos of yours was the one that's called The Anti-Law of Attraction. And I just want to preface the question with a little bit of my experience, because many decades ago, a friend, I was in the cabaret world. We were both singers, cabaret singers, and she said that she started using law of attraction techniques to, get more audience members, et cetera, et cetera. And so she told me about it. I never heard of it, and I started looking into it, and with the idea that that all the feelings that were bad were preventing anything good from happening in my life, and I only had to have good feelings. And so I said, okay, no more bad feelings, only good feelings. And the result was I got really depressed because I'd suppressed, any kind of negative emotion. So what happened was then I said, okay, I don't believe this is a crock. I don't believe in this law of attraction stuff. Then later on, years later, I noticed that when I spend time just simply being the background of awareness, being unconditional happiness itself, my true nature, that for some mysterious reason, things in the relative world seem to go better. But I wasn't actually practicing this sort of manifestation technique of envisioning the car that I want and the job that I want. I was simply just resting in awareness and as awareness. And I loved your video about it, because you say, what if this peace, gratitude, and love can't be cultivated because it's already your true nature? And I was wondering if you could share some of your thoughts about that.
It's interesting, isn't it? And I probably had a similar experience at some point, as we all have times in our life where we really want some particular outcome, and so we're deep thinkers and spiritual beings, so we look to those spiritual answers which have a degree of truth in them and point to something, in the sense that visualization can be an extremely powerful tool. I still do it a lot now, but it's not so much, it's more of a practical thing, as if I'm sure, like, when you created this podcast, you had to have some kind of plan or vision at some point. Not to say that you had to force that or you had to do that, but planning happened, or a vision of it happened. So these things can have relative importance, but I think I named the video with that kind of cheeky, tongue-in-cheek title because I'm pointing at this experience that so many of us have had listening to the law of attraction material, and the ending up in some kind of perpetual mission to get rid of all of the bad feelings and accumulate all of the good ones, and then finding out the disastrous consequences of that. And seeing possibly that there's another way, that there is some kind of truth that love and peace and effortless flow have a correspondence with what manifests harmoniously in our reality. But this is not so much something that we have to brute force our way into, or gather all the good emotions to get into, or transcend upwards into a high vibration, or robotically chant affirmations until we create this state within ourselves. I've tried all of these things, they don't work. What if it's inherent in actually who we already are? And yet those apparently low vibrational emotions are not bad or good, or they are just movements of consciousness, and they may contribute to challenging circumstances when they are stuck, when they are unresolved. But as we rest as the unconditional peace and openness of our true nature, these so-called low vibrational emotions are allowed to process and move through the system and release, exposing more and more of our natural peace and harmony, which then it may express itself in the world as harmonious manifestation. So like the anti-law of attraction really is a kind of just like it's like a pointing to a counterintuitive or backwards approach. So not so much trying to brute force ourselves into a positivity that's out there in the future, or drum ourselves up into a high vibration and try to stay in that state, but instead face the apparent darkness and obscurity that seems to be obscuring what is already there, what is already inherent in our true nature. And like in your experience, simply being had a lot of that emotional energy, then process, and then you found the apparent outcome of that, of resting in open awareness as open intelligence. All the data points and all the form tends to harmonize better. I mean, maybe there's things that are preordained from a higher realm outside the space and time of this dream. Maybe there are certain challenges that we choose before this life or go through in order to grow our soul. Who knows, like, what other factors there are. There are the laws of physics and apparent birth and death, so there are apparent limits on manifestation, and resting as open awareness and the recognition of your true nature won't necessarily get rid of all of life's challenges. But in resting as open awareness and allowing the emotions to flow and process and release, many of us find that life does tend to go more harmoniously, and what is truly desired in our heart tends to manifest quicker and more frequently and more fully and more sustainably.
I've definitely found that too. I hear that, well, that you could do something like a meditation or an inquiry, so we get a better sense of the type of stuff you do. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to guide us in some way at this point to see what that's like.
Sure. I'm guessing in the context of this podcast and our conversation, it's probably going to be in the direction of our true nature and the recognition of our true nature. Not that there is any particular direction, and maybe this is where the meditation or inquiry starts, because we can notice it to be present as the basis of all experience. could feel like I'm preaching to the converted, but I got you guys here in front of me, so I'm going to talk to you guys as if I'm guiding you, but really I'm guiding everyone here in the audience and myself as well. Just to ask the question, can we notice that we are just simply present? We just simply are present, being aware, and that there is just what's happening. And the mind doesn't have to understand that. And can we notice that with what's apparently happening, there are sights, visual phenomena, sounds, perhaps the sound of my voice, but not the meaning of the words, just the pure fact of sound. Sensations in the body. Can we notice any pure, raw, physically felt sensations appearing to come from the body area? The mind may label them as tightness or tension or energy or even positive sensation, but can we get underneath all of those labels and just experience the raw, physically felt sensation? And can we notice that all of this that's apparently happening, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the physical sensations, are all just appearing in this wide open space of awareness, consciousness, just simply presence, just simply being. And can we notice if there are any thoughts that are effortlessly arising and disappearing without a trace in this boundless space of awareness? And can we notice if there's a I, an apparent I or a me in the thinking? What did I do yesterday? What am I going to do after this podcast finishes? I wonder what Alex is even talking about. Can you notice if there's been a momentum of believing and identifying with that I, that character in the thought narrative? Can we just for a moment zoom out from believing ourselves to be that I in the thought narrative and just simply rest, present, and aware as this open awareness? So, who's the real you? The one in the thought narrative, the character, in the thought narrative, the story about you and your life and everything that's apparently happening to me and all my problems and all my desires that don't seem to be coming. Are you really that character in that podcast, in that mental story? If when you look in between the thoughts, you're still here, just as this presence of awareness, consciousness, simply being. And you notice finally this wide open, still, peaceful refuge beyond the story. And just simply be as you are. Noticing yourself as this peaceful, unharmable space of awareness that contains all the content. Resting as this, resting as your true nature. And concluding this investigation to see how the fruits and the benefits blossom in your life.
It's a really sweet and direct way to guide people towards their true nature.
I've had many influences. I can't take credit for all of it, but I guess we synthesize uh, all the information from the greatest sages and teachers and spiritual guides to our own unique remix and our own unique synthesis, and that it's all us at the foundational level anyway, and that everyone is us and we are everyone.
Yeah.
Because that's the ultimate message, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there's everyone, I love hearing different ways that people put it, but realizing that it's so simple. There's really only one message in all of this, and some lands on some ears better than others. And but I feel if people listened to this episode, they would completely get what Awareness Explorers is all about, just right here from what we talked about today and that meditation.
Yeah.
Hopefully that would be a good job done, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. How can people find out about you or know about your work, Alex?
They can YouTube Alex Shailer, Shailer. Probably should spell that because many people don't know how to pronounce it. So Shailer, Alex Shailer, and alexshailer.com. You can find out about my stuff and services if you want to. And yeah, I have an Instagram as well. Basically, just stick it into the internet, Google, YouTube, .com on the end. There I am.
It's nice that
Apparently.
Google and YouTube now has all kinds of non-duality stuff on it. And we thank our Patreon supporters. We give you summaries of these things and lots of additional clips as well. If you want to support us, go to patreon.com/awareness explorers. Anything you want to say, Brian?
I'm just very grateful for this conversation, Alex. I can't wait for our listeners to hear it. So thanks so much.
Beautiful. Grateful to be here too.
Yeah. And to our listeners, thanks for listening. Pass it on to people if you feel that it could be benefit to them. And until next time, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.